All right, just got the YouTube simulcast going. So here is the announcements and housekeeping stuff. So first off, this is a ton of open studio here every single night at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you're working on a mix and you would like some fresh perspective, just drop it into my email and I'll take a listen and help you dial in that mix. We have a couple of things happening. So at the end of the month, we're going to do a live single premiere / mix teardown with Magoo. And as soon as I have the actual date dialed in, I will definitely let folks know. And I'm just kind of like, priming the engine, getting hyped for it. The other thing is if you are doing the Patreon or anything like that, I want you to send me in my email uh, whatever project you would like to get promoted. And this can be rolling. You can change it absolutely whenever. Like if you release a new song or um, do anything cool. I'm going to set up a promo page on the Atonuv website so that I can, promote your stuff a bit. So yeah, Ian, Sinux, Elias, Tyler, and Mason. Just hit me up soonish with that stuff. I'll also do a direct reach out if I don't hear from you. So let's see. There's that, and then rules of engagement. This has definitely not been an issue at all. Like literally zero issues. But moving forward, I just definitely want to standardize this. This is a spot where people send in stuff when it's like rough mixes and stuff still needs to get dialed in. And I understand that there is a level of vulnerability to that. So, chat, keep it like pausey and constructive criticism, I just want that to be a definite rule going forward because I think it's really awesome that we're able to dial in stuff in its rough stages. That's like ideally how it would always work. It would be really awesome if people always felt comfortable doing like rough demos and sharing them. So that's a rule. And that is basically it. So I don't think I have anything in the inbox as of this moment. So if you've got something, please feel free to send it to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. Please read the guidelines at the top of the screen before you do. And yeah. Also worth noting, we've got a good amount of stuff coming in and good amount of people. I do appreciate when folks like share the link. It's just definitely we get more people in when someone else shares the link because it looks like really, you know, people don't like self-promoting stuff. So whenever I share stuff around, it's definitely not as effective as when a community member does. So share that link. If we got another like 10 people in regularly, I think this would just be absolutely hopping. So pretty reasonable. All right. Now, as we wait for tracks, I'm just going to put on some background music. I put together like a few loops over the last week. I'm going to just let those play. Not necessarily feeling super creative today. Um, so I'm just going to let that stockpile of loops help me out a little bit. Get big dog cam going. Some big dog vibes. Hey, if you're just popping in, this is Atonuv Open Studio. Feel free to send tracks in absolutely anytime to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. It's this email address right down here. And check out those guidelines up top. Zach, good to see ya. Yeah, did you get the clip that I sent you from last night? And there's like I think it's like a 15-30 second chat delay. So okay, cool. Yeah, I just have a couple of questions to help dial in this mix. First and foremost, is this a live drum kit or is it samples? All right, cool. Um, that means that there are less things to worry about. I'm going to assume that the kit is phase aligned within Logic, so that isn't something we're gonna have to worry about. But basically, that kick drum, uh, I think I mentioned it. It needs more at 60 to flesh things out. And I'm gonna go ahead and pull up your track again so that I can kind of refresh my memory. And then definitely feel free to ask any follow up questions you might have for me so that we can dial this in. I'm going to kind of like skip around through the track.
You know, baby, it takes a lot of work, but it's been fun all the while. You know, honey, I'd turn the world for you. I'd spend it just to stay a while. Standing in the way, superhuman feet wouldn't keep me from loving you. Gone are the days when it's just us. We got more to care for now. Higher, when I'm learning love with you. Higher, when we're sharing that to do. Higher, when I'm learning love with you.
Yeah, so it's like in in drums, I want to beef up the kick. We're not getting any like fundamental on the kick. And so we're not getting any pump and we're not getting any drive. The kick is really, really just like basketball-y. So just bringing in some 60 into that kick, which, like I think I said, like a pull tech would be awesome. To just add, you know, I don't know, set it to like 3 or 4 and just let that kick drive. Um, the and then kick and bass are fighting a little bit, and then the bass is a little bit like really, really low end focused. So I would toss some like 600, 700, some harmonic excitation on that bass so that we get a little more perception on it. And then it's that 2 to 4K could get spread out uh, kind of between like vocals and guitar to get some. It's very the mix is a little bit like flat and doesn't have any like sparkle. That's kind of like what I would uh describe. And by just getting some of that like harmonic edge on like vocals and guitars, maybe a little bit on the drums, in that 2 to 4K range is just going to help lift this entire track. Um, the That's like the big stuff. And then it's like, yeah, on the left side, it's a I'm almost certain that it's the guitar. It's got a huge resonant thing. It's kind of like all I can hear now. It's at like about 500 hertz, and that needs to get cut.
Every day, passing out our window, time goes by faster and faster now. So no wonder.
Yeah, and vocals are really, really on top, which I think that they could stay about where they are if you gave more. Um, yeah, as far as getting that sparkle, so I would use some sort of like analog emulation EQ rather than a parametric if you have it at your disposal, something that'll add like a little bit of saturation when you boost it. So like a Pultec, a Neve would be cool here. It would definitely keep it in that um like classic feel. An API would be worth trying too. I like using APIs on like kind of like rock arrangements, so that could be cool because they have like proportional cues, so you can get a little bit spiky. They're a little bit dry. Uh, it could be like kind of like picky, so that would be like my definitely the third thing that I try on the list. But yeah, something that gives it a little bit of edge along with that EQ presence is what I would aim for using. Uh yeah. And you gotta track down that resonance on the left side. It's about 500. And I'm not like a huge it's like it's that much of a problem because I'm not like a oh you got to clean up all your tracks and got to make sure that nothing is like ringing or pinging or whatever. But that is like quite, it's like very, very forward and distracting. So it's at five, it's between 5 and 600. Uh, Pretty sure it's the guitar, left side, big resonance. And as far as like cooking up this mix a little bit, kind of like from the ground up, I know that you're kind of like feeling like you're at the end of this mix. So um, it's like when I'm building my chains and I'm working, I'm just kind of like bringing in like subtle bits of saturation throughout the beginning of the mix process. Like first off, I'm not like let's see. I can't read people's names. Uh Zank, nice to have you here. If you're working on anything and you want some mix feedback, you could send it to the email down there. Just take a look at the guidelines at the top of the screen. So, Zach, as far as like how I build my templates and how I kind of workflow through something from the beginning, I'm baking in like very subtle amounts of saturation from like move to move. Um, yeah, absolutely. Um, so that there's kind of like a natural degree of harmonic excitation by the time that I get to the end of the mix. So I'm generally choosing first off to like not compress things that much, but I'm using like analog style compressors and kind of choosing the flavor. Like I'll use 1176s on drums and guitars, and it just kind of like pushes a little bit of edge into them. And I'm only aiming for like 2 dB of compression like throughout the process. Uh and and just stuff like that. So I'm kind of like pushing things a little bit so that at the end and when I'm like bussing everything and finishing up a mix, like I've kind of just naturally achieved a degree of harmonic excitement in that region, and then I don't have to pull like some sort of crazy exciter plug in out and like push things in an unnatural way. So as far as where you're at right now, I would just load up like an analog style EQ and dial in that 2 to 4K. I would um as far as things to play with, like you could leave things as is and then just sparkle up like guitars and vocals. I would really focus on guitars more than vocals in that region because the vocal is pretty on top of the mix. Uh you could also experiment with cutting a little bit of the vocal at like 1.5K and 1K, just a little, and letting the guitar get in there because the guitars are pretty mid range focused, like around 500. That's kind of why you've got like that, uh, that's why that resonance is happening. You've kind of like narrowed those guitars and they're kind of just like a little bit fighty in that region. And I would want to have my edge on guitars, that little bit of spank, like at like 1K. So vocals are clouding that region a little bit. So it's like I would maybe experiment with, and just make sure that the mix doesn't fall apart. I know you don't want to just keep mixing this forever and ever, but it's like worth trying. Like cut the vocals a little bit at 1K, let the guitars ride there a little bit, and then kind of smooth out. You know, you're really heavy between 1 and 2K, and then really scooped between 2 and 4K. So you could kind of like move content from 1 to 2K and move it over to 2 to 4K. It's kind of like sometimes how I think about a mix. I'm like, okay, I got a lot of stuff right here, and there's another octave that I could spread it out into. Um, yeah, and it is. Yeah, I'm just kind of like baking everything in from the beginning. That way, I don't have to do big dramatic moves at any point. And then if it's like, ooh, something's a little bit off, I just like, I can turn off like one plugin and then go like, oh yeah, that's the right amount. Rather than depending on one thing to do all of my work for me. It's just like a series of discrete steps. But yeah, thanks for hopping on to the stream. And yeah, I mean, basically, I just kind of needed to know if these were samples or a live kit, and then we would have had to do more. But basically, like, just beef up that kit and see what happens from there. All right, let me pull up this next track, and yeah, that's awesome. I definitely love hearing rough sketches. That's awesome, man. This is from main/Zank. Here we go. Hey, what's up, lazy kid? Yeah, and you're welcome, Zach. Lazy kid, if you've got a track that you want me to check out, just send it to the email down there, and just check out the rules up at the top of the screen before you do. And I'm about to dive into Zank's track. Let's see what's going on. Oh, it's cool. People send like rough sketches. It's I'm down to listen to anything and help steer you in the right direction. So don't worry too much. Ah, cool.
Got plenty booze I got on deck, from your head down to your neck. Got an extra bed just laying in case you just need some sex. Why you working all the time? Tell me why you ain't around. I think you could have it better, but we argue all the time. But you say that it's my fault, and I act like I don't notice. I got dreams I'm meant to show, but I may be thinking first. Probably why your mama hates me, I can blame her, shit is crazy. Spend my nights right at the crib, maybe you might want to pull up, yeah. I know you hate me, I made mistakes, I'm on my ass, I know I'm lazy. You look away whenever I just call you baby. It's not the same as it was then, but baby lately I'm on my own again. This time I really mean it. Yeah, it's so fun and good for someone else to feel it. It's like a silhouette and I can barely see it. But yeah, I'm trying. I worked some time this morning, I think I lost track of time. I got minutes I can spend with you, it's cool if you don't mind. Tell me why your collar's curly, tell me why you wanna go. Tell me why the front door's open when you know we keep it closed. And I know you probably hate me when I talk to all your friends. Have you doubting all my movements with the same shit all again? I got reasons that I'm guilty, I got reasons that I'm not. You got reasons that you're sorry, but that's not part of the plot. I know you hate me, I made mistakes, I'm on my ass, I know I'm lazy. You look away whenever I just call you baby. It's not the same as it was then, but baby lately I'm on my own again. This time I really mean it. Yeah, it's so fun and good for someone else to feel it. It's like a silhouette and I can barely see it. But yeah, I'm trying.
Cool. I really like this track. There is there's a few things to dial in here. So let's just I'm gonna walk through things kind of like bottom to top of the frequency spectrum, and then we're gonna talk a little bit about like workflow on the mix. So I'm just gonna kind of like power through it. This is a really, really great track, and I really, really like it. So let's like push this over the top and make it really, really dialed in. So first off, your kick and bass are fighting, and there's kind of two ways that we could solve this. First off, your kick is centered at like 40, which is a little, it's like that's a cool place for a kick in kind of like that's where I might put like an R&B kick. But and here's where it's interesting. Like the vibe of this song is like somewhere between like R&B and pop punk. So like I understand why the kick is tuned that low, but your bass is riding kind of in like your bass is just taking up like a lot of space between all the way down to 30 up to 200, which makes sense because that is like 30 is like the lowest fundamental of the bass. Now the thing is that even though that is where the lowest fundamental of the bass is, a lot of the time in like pop and rock production, we kind of just go like, meh, we don't need it on the bass, and we get pretty cutty in that region, and then harmonically excite, so that we kind of get like fake bass, so that we're exciting like 600-ish, 600 700 on the bass, and that's the harmonic of the fundamentals. So then we extend the region of the bass, we get more perceived bass. And we also move it out of the way of the kick. So first off, you could keep the kick where it is and be a little more aggressive at cutting your bass between 30 and 60. And I would also recommend pushing your bass up around 700, around 600, 700. If you have a Pultec, I would use a Pultec on it. I say it all the time. So Pultec would do, an SSL would be great, a Neve would do, but something that's going to add a little bit of harmonic content when you push that region. So we could cut bass, bring bass up higher in the spectrum. We could also take that kick. We could leave the bass as is, but bring the kick so that it's resonating more at 60. Cut it at like 40, boost it at 60, and get the thump of the kick to happen at 60. You have room on the bass there. I would also just do like a pretty narrowish cut on the bass at 60. Put the kick there. So that's like what's up with the low end. Then moving up, guitar is very scooped, and I would want to put in more definition at 500 to 1K on that guitar. On the one hand, once the vocal comes in, the vocal is like really nice and on top that way. But then as we listen more, we're like, that vocal is too on top, and it's not in the mix at all. And it's because the guitar is so scooped. So I would bring in some mid-range definition on that guitar. Once again, using an analog style EQ so that we can get like some pleasantness on it. And that's kind of what I'm thinking on that.
I know you hate me. I made mistakes. I'm on my ass. I know I'm lazy. You look away whenever I just call you baby. It's not the same as it.
Yeah, okay. And then it's a little dull, the mix. And it's like what I want is some harmonic content between 2 and 4K, kind of spreading that between the vocals and the guitar. And maybe like a little bit of...
Baby, lately. I'm on my own again. This time I really mean it.
Yeah, I mean, vocals and guitar.
My nights right at the crib. Maybe you might want to put up it. I know you hate me. I made mistakes. I'm probably why your mama hates me. I can blame her. Shit is crazy. Spend my nights right at the crib. Maybe you.
And it's like and then like once we start moving stuff around, I know that we're gonna need more thwack on that snare. So like we're talking about 1.5K, 2K, something like that, to let the snare cut a little bit. And also that snare doesn't have a lot of body, which once again, like we're kind of like pushing into Piccolo's snare, which is kind of like, once again, we're crossing in between like R&B and pop punk, but I do want some punch on that snare. So we're talking about like finding the fundamental between like 175 and 300 and just giving a little bit of there. And that'll move the speakers and push some air when the snare kicks in. I dropped my mouse. So, that's a thing. Next up, so harmonic excitement between 2 and 4K is gonna help your mix a lot.
I know I'm lazy. You look away whenever I just call you baby.
Snare stuff.
It's not the
Okay.
same as it was then, but baby,
And then
lately.
your vocal is S-ing a lot. At like, it's pretty high up there. Like 8K. Yeah. 8K to 10K, you've got a pretty untamed vocal, and I would want to bring that back. And then it's also like,
It's not the same as it was then, but baby, lately.
we don't have much sparkle and lift on like the cymbals. So it's like all of the high end on this track is just occupied by your vocal like S's and kind of like unpleasant mouth sounds, which is the next thing that that I'm concerned about on the mix. Is this comes down to, it can be fixed in post, but it's also like mic technique and singing technique. Basically, there's a lot of we can hear a lot of mouth sound, mechanical sounds, like lips smacking and your tongue moving and your jaw clicking. Like a lot of that is really pretty present in the mix. And how we avoid that is doing like backing off of the mic. You know, the rule of thumb is like, you know, like this much, something like that, maybe even a little bit more. Aiming the mic more at like your forehead or your throat, experimenting with what sounds better just at the source. And also like drinking some water is going to help get rid of those mechanical noises. And to make it clear, let me pull this up. So now and then as far as fixing it with a plugin, um, let me pull this up. So all right. What I would recommend is the Isotope RX mouth declick. It is going to be your quickest path to success. Sometimes they put them out in a bundle or you can grab it by itself. But the thing is, and I just pulled it up for my voice, is you can set it so that it only picks up mouth clicks. Uh, and I'm going to turn it on, and this is the sounds that I'm hearing in your vocal. All right. So, uh that's why I want to get rid of those sounds, because they're very, once you're keyed in to what it sounds like, you're like, wow, that's very distracting. So, uh yeah, that's okay. I think that's a lot, and that's where I would start with moving this mix around. Oh, workflow. This is peaking sometimes, so you're mixing too hot. And what this means to me is that your system's not working for you, it's working against you a little bit. From the start of a mix, and this is for later, probably, like you've already basically committed to this template. So you're going to want to like turn your speakers or your headphones up at the start of the mix, set a lower target for where you're going to be hitting your peak levels during the mix, like -12, -6 is fine. And then gain stage more aggressively as you're mixing. Okay, great. Yeah, and then there is a ton of streaming YouTube channel, and that hosts the replays if you want to go back and watch this again. I know that that's a lot of stuff. Great. Yeah, I'm happy to help out, and yeah, here every single day at 6 p.m. Please feel free to drop like revisions and stuff and dial it in even more. I really like the track, so just a couple of things to tighten up, and I think it'll sound huge. All right. If you are checking out the stream, this is a ton of open studio. I'm here every night at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you've been working on a mix and you would like some feedback on it, feel free to send it to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. Take a look at the guidelines at the top of the page before you do. And yeah, send stuff in anytime. Feel free to ask questions in chat, say what's up, absolutely whatever. Oh, Zach, I'm sorry, I missed your last question. Yeah, I'm actually wrapping up a mastering session on an album. I'll probably hit that uh tonight or tomorrow afternoon. Oh, I guess you just asked. I'm on like watching two chats. If you're just dropping in, this is a ton of open studio. I'm here every night at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you've been working on a mix and you'd like some fresh perspective on it, you could send it to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. There are some guidelines up at the top of the page if you don't mind taking a read at those. Yeah, feel free to send in anything at any time. Feel free to ask questions in chat or just say hey. All right, folks. While we wait for stuff to come in, I'm just gonna put on some background music. You're just popping in. This is a ton of Open Studio here every single night at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you would like some fresh perspective on your mix, feel free to send it in to atonuvrecords@gmail.com at absolutely any time. Just take a look at the guidelines up at the top of the screen. And yeah, that's how it works. Cool. Yeah, I'm gonna second. Okay. I wouldn't worry about it too much, basically. That's my number one advice. We're talking about stuff between 2 and 4K. Phase collapse is just not that much of an issue. beyond like the low end. If your low end disappears when you phase collapse, big problems. Uh, check your phase, check your mix in mono after you make moves. Uh, and basically, as far as like modern music, like anything post the Cure's disintegration, okay? Um, there's an expected amount of high end collapse in mono. Uh, notably, the example that I use pretty much all the time is the last two Tame Impala records. There are literally guitar solos that disappear in mono, so it's pretty much artistic discretion at this point. Um, an example of really, really tight phase on a modern record is the latest Saint Vincent album, Los Angeles. That's tight. That's basically it 100% mono compatible across the field. So, use some references, use your ear, use your judgment, but also understand that a degree of loss in the high end is acceptable. And also like, okay, so first off, accept that loss is acceptable, and then second off, like just pushing an EQ a little bit. There's kind of like various, you could Google in a rabbit hole of like, oh well, phase linear EQ, so on and so forth. Yeah, a little. It's like we're talking about like a tiny element of production that people get too scared about. And then they don't push their mixes as hard as they could go, and then they don't compete with like a huge modern uh like rock sound, or just like, someone who's comfortable with just kind of like pushing those things a little bit. So yeah, my advice is mostly psychological, I guess, uh, than technical in this specific regard. But it basically comes down to like we're talking about pushing like 2 dB between 2 and 4K like per track, like not anything huge, not anything massive. Uh, yeah, we could get a degree of non-linear phase alignment as we do it, but a degree. And then check your mix in mono. You should always be checking your mix in mono regardless. And then make the call you're being the producer and the engineer at that point. Like, is this an acceptable mono collapse? Does that basically make sense? And then I guess on like the pure technical, I'm like, yeah, I guess you could use a phase linear EQ, but that's not going to give you any of the character or the fun that like using something a little bit less safe would give you. So I would still just pull up one of those like analog model EQs. Cool. Yeah. Yeah, and then also I would stay away, like I'm specifically advising to use um like analog modeled compressors, analog modeled EQs, rather than reaching for like an exciter. I don't love those. I think that they sound in most cases, like unless you're being really targeted and really careful, it's really easy to overdo it. And also it just doesn't sound as good in most cases. So that's why I'm like using templates. I build templates that are more modeled around like analog modeled stuff. And then I've got like I do have like my bus processing that's outboard, and I'll push stuff through that. But a lot of plugins have gotten very good over the last 20 years. What I personally recommend for getting that little bit of mojo, I hate doing like gear talk, and I hate going like this is the magic plugin. That's really not what I'm concerned about. In the it's like engineering, and then just like feeling comfortable moving stuff around. But I do recommend the Kush package. I think it's a. I mean, first off, their stuff sounds great, and they do analog modeling better than like I would say UAD and certainly Waves and like all of that and the Plugin Alliance stuff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think that they just have it dialed in. There's a lot of stuff that they have that you can just absolutely punish, and it still sounds great, like using uh, a piece of physical gear. So I think it sounds really, really, really good. And they do have a subscription package that's actually really, really, really reasonable. It's like $10 a month, and you get uh, a set of tools that's really, 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 really useful for making like a solid modern DAW template. And I think it's awesome. And that's my Kush plug. It happens like once every week or so. I fall into the temptation of hawking gear. I think it's awesome. Hey, Parker, I just saw that you sent something. Are you in chat? Great, cool. Uh, Good to see you, Parker. Let's take a listen. Hey, I love it. Yeah, this continues to just be a whole lot better. Um, the kick in the bass, great like separation there. You could push the kick a little bit more at 60. That would sound really big. You could get it, but also they're separated. That's what matters. I'm perceiving the kick. I'm perceiving the bass. I think it's great. Um, that synth is really, really, really on top of the mix, and it's not just a volume thing, it's that it is just super present, like it's ice picking at 1K. I would want to take that and spread it up to like just kind of like widen the Q so that we get more of just a gentle bump from like 1K to 2K, 1K to 3K. It could just kind of get pillowed out to occupy a little bit more of that upper mid range. It's just too narrowed in at 1K. And that's all I would really change about this. And then that said, I'm just gonna like, eventually you're gonna want to, because just like dialing in your mic technique and figuring out how to make this setup work for you has taken what you're doing and like quadrupled how good it sounds. The next hurdle is going to be being able to get a more reliable multi-input interface, because it's like there are some things that are just inescapable with what you've got right now. Like the recording is very, very, very narrow, and we would want to get more of a true stereo picture of the drum kit. Then your recordings are going to kind of explode out into space. And that would be the next thing to dial in on. I don't want to, like, with what you've got going on, there are like plug-in solutions and like fake stereo with stuff that like could happen. It could theoretically sound better, and like stereo reverb would be like a pretty like non-destructive way, but it's like to really get this stereo depth, we're gonna want to start doing some stereo miking techniques. So that's like on the horizon. This is just such a, once again, huge improvement from that first round of stuff that you sent in. Night and day, really wonderful. So keep on doing these demos, keep getting your stuff figured out, and once that upgrade happens, you're going to be able to take those mic techniques and then turbocharge them. And also, like, if you watch the stream, I don't tell people to spend money. I really don't. In this case, it's like this would, I only recommend it because I know that once you're able to get some true stereo miking stuff happening and getting your gear to work a little more for you, this recording could then become even like another 4 times better. It would be such a huge improvement that it's worth it. Yeah, this is great. You're doing amazing stuff. Keep on practicing with what you've got going on right now. And that's it. That's my recommendation. Keep practicing, but it's much, 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 much better. And if you are just popping in, this is a Ton of Open Studio. I am here every single day at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you would like some fresh perspective on a mix, send it in anytime. You can send it to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. It's that email right there. There are some rules up top if you don't mind giving those a read. And also feel free to say hey or ask a question in chat at absolutely any time. That's it. That's what we're doing. It's really, really nice to be here. All right, while we wait for tracks, I'm just going to put on some background music so that I'm not just silently watching my inbox. If you're just popping in, this is Atonuv Open Studio, here nightly at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you're working on a mix and would like some fresh perspective and feedback on how to tighten it up, just send it to atonuvrecords@gmail.com and I'll take a listen. If you're just tuning in, this is A Ton of Open Studio. You could set a track at absolutely any time to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. Get some fresh mix feedback and perspective. Just take a look at the guidelines at the top of the page. This is A Ton of Open Studio, here every single night at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you're working on a new track and would like some mix feedback, just send it to the email down there. Take a look at the guidelines up there. This is A Ton of Open Studio, here every single night at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you've got a track that you like some feedback on, you can drop that mix to atonuvrecords@gmail.com, take a look at the guidelines up top, and I'll help you dial in that mix. I'm sharing this around Facebook, so kind of just being all promoty, carnival barky. Hey, send in your mixes to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. We'll dial in that mix, tighten it up, figure out what's going on. Okay, if you're just popping in, this is A Ton of Open Studio. I'm here every single night at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you've been working on a recording and would like some top-down feedback on your mix and figure out how to tighten it up a little bit, get it sounding its absolute best, just at any time, feel free to drop that mix to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. Take a listen. Just do me a favor and read the guidelines at the top of the page before you send it in. And yeah, always feel free to ask a question in chat. I will give you some answers. Hey, if you're just popping in, this is a ton of open studio. I'm here every single night at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you have been working on a recording and you would like some top down style feedback on your mix, you can just drop it into my inbox. It's atonuvrecords@gmail.com. There's some guidelines at the top of the screen. That would be great if you took a read. Uh, yeah, we'll play your track and help dial in that mix and get it sounding, bigger, shinier, punchier, more professional, and figure out what's going on in your mixing template, what's going on in your workflow, just how to tighten it all up. Hi, hope you're doing great. This is a ton of open studio. I am here every single night at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you want to get some feedback on your mix, dial in what's going on, get it sounding bigger, better, shinier, stronger, etc., etc., just drop that mix to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. I'll take a listen, see what's going on, lend you my ear. Just take a look at the guidelines at the top of the page before you send something in. And you can always feel free to ask a question in chat. The twitch.tv/Atonuv, that is the best place to hop on. Chat is faster, there's less of a delay. Every other platform, we're dealing with like 30 seconds of back and forth silence. And so full disclosure, I know that there's a couple of people watching on Twitch that are probably like human beings. I just Facebook spammed the link to see if we get some new people in. So that's just like a cattle call of just like, hey, I exist. You're probably scrolling through, doom scrolling, and wondering what's going on with all of your Facebook links and such. So this is a ton of open studio. I'm here every night at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you've been working on like some home recording with your newfound time at home and would like some top-down style feedback from a mastering engineer that will help you get that track a little bit shinier, a little bit punchier, a little bit bigger, a lot better, and talk about your workflow, how you're accomplishing the moves that you are accomplishing, just drop me a track at atonuvrecords@gmail.com. I'll take a listen to it and help you dial it in. Just take a look at the guidelines at the top of the screen before you send something in. That would be awesome. Hey, if you're just popping in, this is Atonuv Open Studio. I'm Scott. I'm here every single night at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you've been working on a mix or a recording or any sort of audio conundrum, feel free to send me your track at atonuvrecords@gmail.com. I'll give it a play, give it a listen, and see what we can do to dial in your mix and take it to the next level. Just take a look at the submission guidelines at the top of the page before you send something in. That would be greatly appreciated. And yeah, always feel free to ask a question in chat, and we can work from there. If you're just popping in, this is Atonuv Open Studio. I'm Scott. I'm here every single night at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you're ever working on a mix and would like some fresh perspective on how to get it sounding its absolute best, you can send it to atonuvrecords@gmail.com at absolutely any time. Just take a look at those guidelines at the top of the page before you do. I'd love to hear what you're working on. And it's like, you might wonder, why am I doing this? Well, a few things. First off, I am an advocate and a fan of open source information and being available to people at, any level of production. It's a thing I truly enjoy and truly believe in. Coupled with a bit of, generally speaking, January, February, March, in a normal year, there's not that much going on for me. And then in a pandemic year, very, very little. So this has turned into something that I just really, truly look forward to. And yeah, it's awesome. So really cool to be here. Really love helping people out. If you've got a track that you'd like me to take a look at, feel free to send it to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. Absolutely anytime. I'll help you get it sounding super good. Just take a look at the guidelines at the top of the page. You can watch Getting Asleep. That's how we roll. Hey, if you're just popping in, this is Atonuv Open Studio. I'm here every single night at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you've been working on a song and want some fresh perspective on your mix, just drop it into atonuvrecords@gmail.com. That email right down there. There's some guidelines at the top of the screen if you don't mind giving those a read. Yeah, I'll take a listen to your track and help you dial it up to the next level. If you're just popping in, this is Atonuv Open Studio. I'm here every single night starting at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you'd like some fresh perspective on a track, just drop your mix to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. Take a look at the guidelines at the top of the page before you do. And always feel free to say hey or drop a question in chat. And as we wait for submissions, just have some background music and dog cam and a very cute Sleepy Guinness. If you're just popping in, this is Atonuv Open Studio. Here every single day. If you've been working on a recording or would like some feedback on your mix, you can just send it to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. Take a look at the guidelines at the top of the page. It would be great to hear what you're working on. Hey, if you're just popping in, this is Atonuv Open Studio. Here every single night. If you've been working on a recording, would like some fresh perspective on your mix, just send it to the email down there. Read the guidelines up there. I'd be really happy to hear what you've been working on. Hey, if you're just popping in, this is Atonuv Open Studio. Here every single night, starting at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you want some fresh perspective on your mix, you can just send it to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. Just take a look at the guidelines at the top of the page. Nothing in the inbox right now, so it's just like some background music and a very, very sleepy dog right down there. Yeah, and always feel free to like ask a question or say hey in chat. Hey, this is Atonuv Open Studio. You just popped in. You get live mixed feedback. You just send a track to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. Help you dial it up to the next level. There are some guidelines up top if you don't mind giving those a read. Nothing in the inbox currently, so just seeing what happens. Had some stuff earlier in the day. Big old. A little bit of a lull right now. You know what? I didn't check out Elder Island. Let me, nothing wrong with lurking. I'm gonna listen to it right now. I'll listen off stream. I'm gonna check it out. Just pulled up Spotify and I'm checking out The Big Unknown. What should I listen to? Cool, I'll check that out. Yeah, this is fun. It's got that old school like 90s acid bass. Always. I'm a bit of a glutton for that. Oh yeah, I've got Cape Fear going right now. Ah, it's a Shigeto remix. That makes sense. Yeah, this is gonna go on the playlist. This is good stuff. Oh, this is okay. I pulled up the Omnitone collection remixed. I'm getting, let's see, where is, I think this is the pure Omnitone collection. Let's take a listen to that. Ah, different vibe. Yeah, it's kind of has oh, never remember their name, but it's like in that same, oh, that's going to bother me. I got to look it up. Um but like that hi-fi hyper electronica kind of thing. Let's see. I know they were on Cranky. Who am I thinking of? Or were they not? I'll eventually remember. Yeah, this is great. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I help book at Trumbleplex in Detroit during normal times, and that's like I do that here, and then my studio in normal times I do in studio performances for DIY bands that tour through and like get like a crowd of like 20 people and do like a whole hi-fi thing and record it. Uh, Actually, I only got around to doing it like twice before pandemic, so that was a bit of a bummer. But hopefully soon. Uh, and that's awesome. Yeah, that's uh I wanted to find a thing that could still be impactful to the DIY community, cuz it's been like a year and I miss all the people, you know? Uh so I figured it'd be cool to bump up some recordings for folks uh in the interim, cuz we still got time to go. Yeah. Yeah. It's uh it's been a little bit mind loosey, but I don't know. There's a degree of it's like semi comfortable at this point, but I just miss shows. I miss touring. That's the other thing, like outside of uh when it's not like work time, it's tour time, and I haven't like played a show since October 2019. It has been a bummer. Uh but yeah, once stuff happens again, totally feel free. Detroit is hard to book if you ever need to route someone into the Midwest. I'm happy to help out in Detroit and can also point people in pretty good directions throughout the Rust Belt. Yeah, thank you for the music recommendation. I popped it into a playlist. I will be using it for references and stuff. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it's the the great I mean, uh I've been involved in like DIY touring for like 13 years at this point. It's literally my favorite, and uh yeah, it's my favorite thing in the world. I love everywhere. I love everyone. All of my best friends are people that I see like 2 times a year from tour. Uh and it's a huge bummer that a bunch of places kind of stopped operating post Ghost Ship, and then like we had to deal with the whole like 4chan Nazi situation in Detroit for a while. Um, I don't know. I'm kind of vaguely hopeful that once we can start playing stuff again, that we might have no choice but to kind of rally around like DIY spots again. And maybe there's going to be a leveling out cuz I do love what happens there. All right. And if you are just popping in, feel free to drop a mix to my email, atonuvrecords at gmail.com. Just take a look at the guidelines up top before you do, and I'd be happy to take a listen to what you've been working on. Hey, if you're just popping in, this is a Ton of Open Studio. I'm here every single night starting at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you've been working on some music and want some fresh perspective on your mix, feel free to send it in to a ton of records at gmail.com. Just take a look at the guidelines scrolling at the top of the page if you don't mind. And yeah, feel free to say hey or drop a question in chat, and we can dial stuff in that way as well. and let's all just enjoy the perfection that is Guinness right now. I'm gonna blow him up full screen. Look at that good boy. I mean, serious. Oh, he is gonna. I think he's about to have a little dog dream. This is this is top down professional mastering advice, style feedback on your tracks, but also more importantly, just me talking about my dog like way too much. But how could I not? Look at that angel face. Seriously, y'all. But seriously, you can send a track at absolutely any time, and I'll take a listen to it. Mr. Guinness. Top notch doggo. Hey, if you're just joining in, we are watching my dog sleep and also providing mastering style top down mix feedback on whatever it is that you're working on. You can send stuff to atonuvrecords at gmail.com. Just take a look at the guidelines at the top of the page before you do the scrolling stuff, like way up there at the tippy top. I'm happy to take a listen to absolutely anything you're working on, and I really do love hearing what people have been doing. So send it in whenever. Feel free to say hey or drop a question in chat. Oh, Sky Too Tall. Are you in chat? I see that you just emailed. I'll just give. It's always best. I see that you emailed, so I'm assuming that you're here. Let me know if you are, so that we can like chat about your stuff. If you're watching on Facebook, just know that I like never actually get the notifications for stuff on there. So, um, email me or hop on over to the YouTube or Twitch has the best chat as far as not being delayed. Oh, right on, man. Cool. Thanks for sending the track. Let's get it dialed in. All right, let's take a listen.
I've been searching for peace my whole life. I've been searching for peace my whole life. Searching for the pieces that should fit just right. I've been searching for peace my whole life. Piece my life together, caught up in knots. I was going through some crazy trailblazing a lot. I was going through the woods just to find my head. I was caught up in the stream, now I write with some lead. Get my pencil high, and I'm high and I'm feeling right. Yeah, and I'm high and I'm feeling right. I just grab my pencil and I'm flying, I'm feeling right. Right. I've been waiting for peace my whole life. I've been waiting for peace my whole life. Searching for a reason that it feels so nice. I've been searching for peace my whole life. This is not the end, this is not pretend. Reach out to your friends, maybe lend a hand. Maybe speak the truth, do something new. Seek a new view, find the real you. Maybe take the time out, create a new hideout. This is time to shine now. Maybe take the time out, create a new hideout. This is time to shine now. Maybe take the time out, create a new hideout. This is time to shine now. I'm looking for less crime now. Looking for the vibe now. Looking for the vibe now. Still asking why now. Still asking why now. Still asking why now. Why now? Still asking why now. Why now? Still asking why now. Why now? Why now? I've been waiting for peace my whole life. I've been waiting for peace my whole life. Try to put together the pieces just right. I've been waiting for peace my whole life.
Yeah, happy to take a listen. I love the vibe. I think that that is dialed in. Like you like the boom bap is there and you've got like some nice like dusty samples and I think that you have dialed in that vibe. You have created the space that you have sought to create and it's very successful in that. Um Mixing wise, especially when we're doing something like this, I love the sounds that you've chosen. I love the samples. I love the kick. I love the snare. I love the hat. Um, there is a whole lot of fighting going on from 30 hertz to 500. It's just like everything is like basically crammed in to that region. We've got vocals are down there, all of the samples are down there, the drums are down there, the sound effects, the verbs, like everything is just living from 30 to 500. So especially with like something where we want to have like a lot of power in the low end, we're gonna get power and like perceived loudness and perceived low end through through really really defining everyone's roles. It's crucial from 30 to 200 especially that everyone is very very carved out and distinct. So like We've got like some bass samples that are going all the way down to 30, which totally makes sense. The bass has a fundamental at 30 hertz, but we want to be kind of gentle with like especially the 30 to 60 so that it's not fighting with the kick. And then that like the vocals are really, really low, mid focused, 200 to 500. And I would just go into the mix and just look at everyone who is existing below 500 and start to make choices and put them into more partitioned places. You know, like medium wide bell cuts on an EQ. And I'm talking about like just going through and like cutting like 3 to 6 dB in these low end regions with like some medium sized EQs. We don't need to do like narrow, like we're finding resonance cuts or whatever. Just we're generally want to smooth out that low end so that everyone feels like they're more distinct. So, okay, so kind of like a long answer right there. And then we are really, 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 really scooped from like 1K to 2K. And that is a crucial region to have sounding good and full in your mix. So 1 to 2K is, where the human ear is most sensitive. So it's where we call it where perceived loudness lives. So if we are too heavy from 1 to 2K, then it can be like harsh. That's where it's harsh. But conversely, if it's too weak from 1 to 2K, then the track is soft or undefined, non-detailed, etc., etc. It's like where all of the presence lives in the mix, and this is just really, especially compared to just like how much stuff is happening from 500 and below. If you took some of that information, like the vocals, and you gave them sparkle between 1 and 2K, and just kind of leveled out, and this is always hard to exactly dial in on like a baritone voice, like what's happening here, because the fundamental of the vocal is, of course, in that 200 to 500 region. So what we need to do is use like subtle saturation throughout the mixing process and like analog style EQs that add a bit of harmonic excitement when we push that region. Something like a Pultec, a Neve, an API, or an SSL. Any of those would do. So I'm going to, like throughout the mixing process, like on the vocal, I'm going to be engaging subtle degrees of saturation throughout the process. I'm going to use an analog style compressor or like my analog outboard, but plugins will do just fine for this. Like grab some flavor stuff because they are pushing a little bit of harmonic content in that 1 to 2K range. And you're just going to add a little bit on like your plugins as you go, because we want to sparkle up that vocal so that it pushes over the top of the mix without just like doing volume on it. So we want to get rid of some of its like low mids, add sparkle, and then the vocal is going to come over the top and it's not going to feel as congested. You're going to be able to use less compression, etc., etc., etc. So that vocal needs to have 1 to 2K presence. And then I would go through the rest of your samples and the rest of your mix and kind of add a little bit of stuff like 1 to 2K, 2 to 4K. It's all just pretty dull and down in the low mids. So get a process for adding that sparkle and just kind of push everyone a little bit. We're talking about 2 dB on a sample here, 2 dB on the vocal, just like 2 to 4 dB spread out in that upper mid range to sparkle up the mix. This is essentially going to address everything. And then, like I think the beat's great. I think the arrangement is really good. I would play, and then this is where we're getting into definitely artistic subjective territory. I would play around with tuning that vocal a little more. It's like it's just outside of vibe. Like I'm not a big vocal tuner. I'm really not. I'm like pretty raw in my approach on a mix, but it's also I will tighten them just a little because I like the vibe of a vocal that has like a little bit of give on pitch, but this is just like right outside of vibe and bordering on like distracting. I would just like throw like a general auto tune and just like put it on like a subtle setting and just tighten it up like 1 degree, and I would call it good. Or don't. That's in the realm of art at that point. Oh yeah, totally. I think it's great. And yeah, I mean dialing in uh I love home recordings. It's what I'm working with a lot of the time. Um what's your monitoring setup like? What are you listening on? And if you're just popping in, this is a ton of open studio. We're here every single day starting at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you've got a track that you want me to check out, you can send it to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. There are some guidelines scrolling at the top of the page. Please read those before you send something, and we'll have an easier time. And then always feel free to say hey or ask a question in chat. But yeah, so matter at hand, what are you listening on in your mixing environment? Are we working with monitors? What monitors are they? Is it a headphone mix, etc., etc.? Because there are ways to dial in these home setups where you can get huge results without like spending a bunch of money. Cool. Um, yeah. Next step would be some monitors. Monitors and an interface. You'll need an interface to get the most out of the monitors. As far as hooking them up, you don't want to like get a nice pair of monitors and then like go through the headphone jack. So, um, a just like a Focusrite Scarlett 2 input interface would be a huge step up for you, and you can snag one of those for like $80. And then a microphone a little bit nicer than the Blue Yeti, which would be like literally any condenser that isn't like dependent on a USB thing, just like a mic. The Yeah, but I mean that's eventually as far as like a headphone mix, this makes sense. Headphone mixes are uh headphone mixes are gonna be inherently kind of like down in that region. And it explains why it's really scoopy from 1 to 2K. Uh, because the ear is so sensitive to 1 to 2K when we're working in cans, and if we're like listening to a mix over and over and mixing, then we develop like ear fatigue, and we're gonna just be cutting in that region because it's gonna be really obnoxious to us. And we have to be aware of it even when we're working on monitors, but even more so on headphones, is we're just going to be subconsciously taking away from that 1 to 2K. So, I mean, basically, how you can avoid it is like listen at a lower volume, and give your ears plenty of breaks as you're mixing. Do like a half hour on, 15 minutes off, which is kind of a bummer because you want to get into the flow of things, but also if you're just making like counter intuitive decisions as a result, then yeah, take a break. Yeah, this looks like a headphone mix, and it's a good one. Yep. Yeah. So, grab some monitors eventually, and then just to run you through like what I would recommend in that world. And it's like, take your time, buy things a step at a time. I know like how expensive stuff is. And I definitely don't want people to spend a bunch of money. It is beyond my philosophy. Like, if you're getting okay results, just, work with what you got. But here is like kind of my go to guide. As far as studio monitors that you can grab for a home studio at a decent price, you are not going to be able to beat the Yamaha HS series. They are not like flashy. A lot of people hate the Yamaha HS for the reason that they are good. They are not flattering. They are very, very flat. They don't have a hyped low end like the KRKs, or like even the cheapy M Audios have a really hyped like 100 to 200. And as a result, the HSs are not flattering. They have a very, very detailed mid range. The HS5 is very, very, very reasonably priced. I would recommend pairing them with a sub. And you could just grab any sub because they're just not going to push air, especially if you're doing hip hop stuff. So I sincerely recommend the HS series. Really, really clean results. The Atom ATs, I think, are similarly priced. And those will work. Those will get you like a flat response. And that's really the best you can do for like under like a certain sum of money. And those Yamaha HSs will compete with anything up to until you're starting to spend like $2,000 a monitor. So first off, yeah, and yeah, so we're talking about a Scarlett. Just those you can just grab one used. They're pretty rock solid. There shouldn't be issues with stuff. Just make sure you're getting it for someone reputable. You can grab it for nothing. HS5s, very good. You would want to pair them with a sub. Then where we're going to go is like exactly how to set them up so that you're getting the absolute most. So, then it's room setup. And a lot of this is just non-negotiable stuff. Like, and also if you are now you have to evaluate the room that you're in. And if you can't accomplish these moves, then we want to try something else. In which case, in the decision tree, if we can't set up a room like this, then I would look into the Slate VSX headphones. They are the real deal, and you can get you'll spend less money than going with the monitors. You're still going to be mixing on headphones, but they are a much better headphone experience. So, your room, you need to be able to set up your monitors along the short wall. Okay, so like, you've got your room and it's a box or whatever. So you've got short wall and then long walls. So the wall in front of you needs to be the short wall, has to be. And then your listening position, where you put your head, okay? Oh, yeah. The VSXs would be... the Slate VSX has like room modeling within it, and it's pretty crazy. There's some stuff happening there that would be better. The best would be like speakers in a room pushing air, etc., etc. But has to be short wall, your listening position 30 to 40% back from the front wall, and then the monitors go in an equilateral triangle from your listening position, and they are equidistant from the side walls. First things first. Setting up your speakers like that in that position is going to move the needle as far as an accurate frequency response faster than anything else. So that's the first order of business. You need to be able to set up in a room in that configuration. If you're off center or along the long wall, it's kind of like bordering on pointless to drop this much cash on monitors. Then from there, you're going to want to do 2 pieces of acoustic treatment, and this can happen over time, but the sooner the better. And you want to develop your ear training and your mixing style within this environment. You want to like consume all the music that you listen to within this environment. You're training your ears within this space. Set up those speakers in that fashion, and then you're going to want to set up a reflection-free zone, or an RFZ. That's pretty reasonable to do. It's as easy as acoustic treatment from your monitors to your ears, and it's just lined up between there. It's going to take care of like cancellations and reflections from between your monitors to your ears. This is pretty easy to accomplish as far as figuring out where to put acoustic treatment, and also easy to do, and also reasonably priced. Dealing with like Oralex foam, like the cheap squishy stuff or whatever, pointless. It's cheap, but it's a waste of money, and it does nothing for you as far as all of this. On a consumer level, you will get okay, awesome. Yeah, I'm happy you're here in this studio build world. On like a prosumer level, the Preem Acoustic room kits will get you good results. They will get you results that are measurable, and they are worth the money. Okay? So something like the Preem Acoustic London kit comes with like 4 big panels, and you can use those to set up an RFZ. And then they've got some scatter blocks that you can like put in the back of the room and kind of like dial stuff in. But really the big panels as an RFZ, they work great. And they will get you what you want. And then there is like a Preem Acoustic London kit that comes with like 2 bass traps, and they're functional. And like 2 bass traps up against the front wall. The Preem Acoustic ones are yeah, the starter kit Prima panels, like the Preem Acoustic. Let me link to it. But I think it's like a room kit is, I think it's like $300. But let me double check before I just like tell you a lie. Okay, so I just dropped it in chat. This is a room kit without bass traps. So, and this runs $250, and this would get you the RFZ, which is crucial. Now, so we're talking about like getting those speakers placed, putting an RFZ, and then doing front wall bass traps. So bass traps across both corners. The Preem Acoustic bass traps you could pop into this kit for probably, I think it's like an extra 100 or $150, and they are good, but they're not great. So as far as bass trapping, what I would recommend for getting the absolute most bang for your buck, two options. The Prima-Acoustic ones, like if you just want to be like over and done with it, like sure, it'll get you some results. The two options that you then have are building it yourself if you're a little bit handy, and if you want to build your own treatment, you could even build your own RFZs. So you would frame out like a wood frame that's long enough to reach from your monitors to your head, okay? And you could do two panels, and you could build them with wood, and then grab like rock wool, and you could double layer it, and then wrap it in a breathable fabric. Working with insulation kind of sucks. Do it outside if you can, and wrap it real tight, and then that's it. And that's going to be the cheapest way to do this. Now, the second cheapest way to do room treatment is to get Owens Corning 703. I think just look up Owens Corning base traps and it'll give you the exact model. And then this is more of like a panel, and it's easier to work with, and you'll get slightly better results, but it's also slightly more expensive. So, hey, Himlim, what's up? So that's so Owens Corning, I think it's 703. Give it a Google. You could build RFZs and also very good bass traps out of that for your front corner. Oh, thanks. Okay. Sometimes I get distracted reading chat. So, okay. Owens Corning 703, you could do RFCs. You could definitely do very good like corner wedge style bass traps with that if you're feeling handy. The other thing, and I think that it gets like kind of the best results as far as DIY, is the super chunk bass trap method. And that's just like you grab like a few packs of rock wool and you literally chunk it out. You make a super chunk trap. It's Googleable, but it's pretty self-explanatory. You just get a bunch of chunks and then you corner it out and you do like 2 feet, 2 to 4 feet, breathable fabric, and then you've got like really, really like pretty powerful bass traps. And that's that. And then if you want something that looks really pro and really nice and is within a reasonable amount of money, look up GIK Acoustics and look at what they got going. Their tri-corner traps are excellent and they look really, really good. And that's what I use. And it adds, like, if you don't want to just have like kind of like a DIY looking thing. My mixing room is like DIY paneling, and then my mastering spot is GIK. It's worth looking up. So yeah, that's basically room treatment and room setup, like in a nutshell. And yeah, feel free to ask me anything if you need clarification. And also, I'm here every day. If you are working on stuff and want to bounce something off of me, definitely feel free to stop by and, ask. Oh, yeah, feel free. Send something in. All right, if you're just popping in, this is a ton of open studio here every single night starting at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you've been working on a recording and want to get some fresh perspective on it, just send it to atonuvrecords@gmail.com, the email down there. Take a look at the guidelines up top. Sky Too Tall is sending a track in at the moment, but definitely feel free to send in something. And you're always welcome to say hey in chat or ask a question and dial in some stuff. I'm happy to help. Cool. Just got your track. Hey, yeah, I figured that this would be cool for folks, especially since we have a lot of time to probably work on home recordings. I am a mixing and mastering engineer, primarily a mastering engineer, and it's 200 a mix and 50 a track for mastering. That is what I standard charge people. But I'm also here to help people out with their mixes every day for free.
I started my own way, my own way, my own way. I started my own way, my own way, my own way. Caught up in this rat race, this rat race, this rat race. Caught up in this rat race, this rat race, this rat race. I started my own way, caught up in this rat race. Every day's a new maze, a new maze, a new maze. I started my own way, caught up in this rat race. Every day's a new maze, a new haze, a new days, a new days, a new day, a new day, a new day.
We're all caught up in a haze, still stuck up in a maze. Yeah, life's a mouse trap, we're all hunting for the cheese. Run around in circles, only aiming to please. Take another selfie, upload it with ease. Stuck up on the gram like we got a disease. Scrolling through life and forgot about the breeze. Don't forget to stop, take a look and just breathe. At least climb a tree, or maybe plant a seed.
I started my own way, caught up in this rat race. Every day's a new maze, a new haze, a new days, a new days, a new day, a new day, a new day,
Cool. So once again, you've got the vibe dialed in. Really great. And the good news is this is very consistent. It's basically a mirror of the other track as far as it's pretty heavy up to 500, and then it's very scooped in the upper mids. and it's it's cramped and needs more definition in the low end. It's basically the same issues as the other track, and that is great news. Once you're achieving consistency in your mixing, then that means that you can achieve consistency on a higher level. So that's very good. Um, the singing voice is like very what's interesting is like it's very represented in that like 200 to 500 kind of mud, and it needs to be lifted out. The rap, because there's just more energy coming out, it naturally has more like 1 to 2K, which made it better and more like on top of the mix. It's still scooped. So it's like even that we would want to add some edge into. Um, the thing that is different on this track is there is some like pretty audible clipping. I think it's from the kick. So that's something that would need to be dialed in the mixing stage. I'm suspecting that there's like some inner clipping happening, like you might be mixing kind of hot and you might have just pushed the kick like really hard in the mix. But it's like sounds like crunchy, like digital overs rather than like nice, pleasant distortion. So that would have to be addressed. Um, yeah, I think that just turning the kick down, I think it's probably just clipping the master channel somewhere. Um, and then this could speak to an overall workflow thing. So I'm not sure. I don't want to just lecture on something, but like, go look into gain staging. And it's just, hitting targets and managing our levels as we go into our master bus. And once we dial in like that gain stage mindset, you're gonna find that it's way easier to get things to like sit in the mix and mesh with each other. I could go in if you're totally unfamiliar. I could like go into it a little bit, but it's a bit involved, but it's also not too bad. And yeah, when we're mixing ourselves, definitely think of it as like we kind of have to switch our brain at every single thing. Like we're performers and we're writers, but then we're producers and engineers. So it's like you got to mix it like an engineer. You have to put on that hat and put on that whole new mindset and like push your voice, because like on a professional recording, it's like vocals on top. Cool. So where are you using limiters in your process? That's like a kind of a question that'll answer a lot of questions. All right. So when you're starting out, okay, so limiting is in its purest form best left as one limiter that's going to go on your master after the mix is done. And there are definitely limiter tricks and some really powerful limiting applications that I occasionally use as like a spice, or like ooh, nothing else is working, and it's like last thing that I'm going to pull for, and like some other things. But if you're just starting out, I would definitely not be throwing a limiter on your vocal to get things to work. And that's pointing to a host of other issues within the mix. Like what I would be recommending, and honestly, like what should take you most of the way through the mix, is just level balancing on like getting a balance that is good, and then achieving the mix through like EQ and compression, and that's it. And then gain staging as you go. So we're talking about basically you've got your tracks, you've got your mix, and I'm gonna toss, my EQ, my compression, and so on and so forth. And I'm going to set a mix tool plugin or a gain plugin, depending on your DAW. It'll be called a few different things. But I'm going to not touch the faders on the DAW. I'm going to balance things out with the mix tool, and then also look for my main fader, my master out, hitting between -18 and -12 on peaks. Okay? And then I like turn up my monitors accordingly. And like within my system, I have like, it's marked. I've got my mixing volume and my mastering volume, and I just, go between the two. And I have my monitors set at a loud enough level that I am not like cranking my DAW to get levels, and I'm never running up against a ceiling, and I'm never needing to use a limiter to crush something enough to get it on top of the mix. Just mixing. So that's the first cool. That's the first plugin that I'm using on every single track, like a mix tool or a gain plugin. I balance everything out and get a nice balance before I touch anything, and I'm not touching faders. And then I'll like throw EQs on stuff and EQ and get frequency balance that way. And then like another mix tool and gain stage and level everyone out, and then hit a compressor and then gain stage and level everyone out. And just kind of like that. And that's my basic process. And then sometimes it's like the compressor has like gain, and you don't have to necessarily use like a gain plugin like after every single plugin, but it's just like constantly managing your levels so that we're not going above that that threshold that we've set kind of arbitrarily, like -18, -12, -6. There is some stuff to like, you'll see some stuff about like, oh, well, you should be aiming for -18 dBFS because there are plugins that distort above that. And that is vaguely true. There are like analog style EQs that do add saturation if you drive them harder than a certain level. In some cases it is -18 dBFS, but you could like read a manual for all your plugins. But it's like grain of salt with that advice. Like just like making all of your tracks output -18 isn't going to make your mix better necessarily. It's a general guideline. And like, yeah, some of those plugins do like distort a little bit. Some of those plugins do distort a little bit, but sometimes we want them to distort a little bit. They're analog modeled EQs, and they add like a pleasant saturation. So sometimes I want to drive them. I want to have the control and the ability to decide if I'm driving them or not. And yeah, there are like input levels and all that, and that's usable for sure. But also the good old gain plugin, you get that extra layer of control on your mix. So you're gain staging at every step of the way. You're sending things to buses, and then you are balancing your mix again on the bus level, gain staging on the bus, so on and so forth. You make all your moves. And then you hit like the end game of your mix, where ideally it's sounding really good, it's sounding really balanced, and like it's a good mix. And then you take it over the top because you haven't touched your faders. And the way that it works is so the smaller the fader movement, the more powerful it is, et cetera, exponential gain, all sorts of stuff. So then you can set up a little automation and you can ride levels on those faders, just up or down 3 dB on those faders on the end game of your mix to give that mix a little bit of life and a little bit of natural pump and like all of that. And you figure out very, very musical like automation moves. And then that just adds that little bit of like pro like life to your music. And that's kind of like a bonus for having all of your gain stage set up. And then, like, at the end of this process, your mix should be sitting at, like, somewhere between, and then, like, stuff happens. Like, you push something and you're just like, man, it just sounds good pushed a little bit. And I broke my -12 rule, and now I'm at -8 on my peak levels on my master. But I just really love how it sounds. And it's like, yeah, that's fine. Like, it's fine. You'll be fine. Like, nothing is broken at that point. And you still have tons of headroom. Like during peak loudness wars times, mastering engineers were like, send me it at -6, which is also like vaguely a lie that mastering engineers told, like, it's a very helpful lie. The like the reason that you'll see like, oh, the mastering engineer wants your track back at -6 peaks. It's because it's going to encourage a better mixing template and a more responsible way of handling your levels. I could technically master something that's being sent, as long as it doesn't have a limiter on it, if it's hitting peak levels of -0.01, I could still work with it. It would be kind of a pain in my butt, but it would also be doable. It's not broken. As long as it doesn't have a limiter, because then I have to deal with dynamic range stuff. But you say -6 because it's going to encourage a healthier gain structure in the mix, and the mix will sound better. And what the mastering engineer is always trying to do is basically make a better mix happen, because mastering is not magic. Mix, it's like the master is only as good as its mix. So, you've set a target of like -18, -12. You push the kick a little bit over, and you're like, man, it just sounds better if it's like if I'm hitting like -8 or whatever. I just love how it sounds. Totally fine. You could print that mix and then put it into a mastering session, blow it up. It'll sound great. It'll sound clean. It'll sound huge. Kaido, what's up, man? And yeah, that's gain staging in a nutshell. And then it's like you'll be more comfortable with it the more that you practice with that mindset and that kind of template. So yeah, play with it and see what happens, basically. I'm doing all right tonight. Had a few really excellent tracks come in. Yeah, and Sky, feel free to come back absolutely anytime. If you want to shoot a follow to the Twitch page, that would be awesome. Tell people about it, so on and so forth. That'd be cool. And yeah, send stuff anytime. Thanks for the follow. Good luck setting up your studio, and thanks for all the music. Yeah, dog love is the stuff. Cool. Kaido, send in that track. I am starting to feel a little bit hungry and I guess a little bit. Yeah. I'm a little bit hungry. So, let's check out a track and I will I'll definitely do the one. Let's keep it to one track today. Whoa. 100 songs. That's awesome. Yeah, quarantine is makes 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 for getting a lot of stuff done sometimes. Awesome. Thanks for stopping by. Yeah, Kaido, that's awesome. Oh, Facebook page is a ton of records. So the email address. I'm not on Facebook that much. So the following the Twitch page is like a pretty solid social media. Yeah, we can get these tracks sounding huge. Oh no, another yikes. All right, let's take a listen. Cool. Another awesome track. So first off, like all of your sounds here have a degree of just like kind of garbage rumble below 20 hertz. High pass them out. That'll give you some gains overall. So there's kind of like two sections to the track. So let's like look at it kind of like section by section. So the first part here. And in general, I would take this whole opening before the drop and just kind of bring up your levels on everybody, like automate some faders, just like 2 dB. The gulf between the two sections is kind of like too large. It's like contrast is good, but this much contrast is just gonna make it like weird in the end. I would just like bring up everything 2-3 dB. Okay. So we've got like this sub bass. It's pretty heavy, 30 to 60. Cut it like like 2-3 dB, 30 to 60, and then put it up in a 100 to 200. And the thing is that these are going to have to get kind of treated like with automation, like they're basically like two different mixes. That is like a thing to consider here. We have so much contrast, we're going to have to automate everything a lot. So it's like the bass here at the beginning, it's way too down between 30 and 60, and it needs to get like popped up a little bit. And then it's like pretty good. I would try to sparkle up this like main sample a little bit, give it some stuff between 1 and like 4K. Just give it some oomph. And then once we get here, okay, you know what I would do? I wouldn't automate. So we're taking that original sub bass and we're shaving it a little bit between 30 and 60, and then we're giving it some life between 100 and 200. And then you've got kind of that metallic, like dubstep bass that comes in. That main line. Okay, cut it back between 100 and 200 and just let it be a little bit mid-rangey. Like, just clean up the low end on that main sound. And I'm talking about like 2 to 3 dB cuts, like up to 200, to just let room for stuff happen. And then it's going to play off of the sub more. And then you could also punch up that sound a little bit. Let's hear how the snare is here. Yeah, snare's great. Oh, you know what I would do? Okay, so take out a little 100 to 200 on that metallic line. The brass, too empty, needs to get pushed up between 250 and 500. Yeah, so that's going to get rid of that emptiness on the brass. And then in the second half, between 1 and 2K, kind of spread the love between the brass and the metallic bass stuff. We're scoopy between 1 and 2K. So see what you feel about what you want to live in that really crucial 1 to 2K. It's what's going to make something like kind of inherently be on top of the mix. So, use your judgment, and that's like an artistic decision. That's basically my read on this mix. Yeah, and once you make those low end adjustments, okay, yeah. So the metallic thing, the metallic sound, take away like 2-3 dB between 100 and 200. Then the brass samples bring up 250 to 500. They'll sound less empty. And 1 to 2K, that needs information in the mix, and you're going to be able to decide what gets that 1 to 2K. You could give it to the metallic thing, and then it's going to be really, really present in the mix. You could give it to the brass. You could give it to some percussion stuff, or throw it on an effects channel. Whatever you want to kind of have an inherent, like, power in the mix. And you could spread it throughout a few things as well. Something at 1K and then something at 1.5K and something at 2K. Yeah, that's where it's at. That's where the mix is at. And yeah, everything is kind of like shoved together dynamically, and we're getting a little bit like a little feeling of claustrophobia, a bit of like over compression. But once you make those cuts from like 100 to 200, it's gonna have some more pulse and breath and feel better and be more impactful and like move the speakers more. So that's it. Like, great track. I think it's awesome. It's totally different. Just make a couple of moves and you're in a better space. Yeah, happy to do it. I love hearing your stuff, and yeah, if you have any specific questions on this track, I'm happy to answer. I'm also I'm pretty sure I'm done for the day. I'm starting to feel a little done. But definitely, if you've got something to wrap up or any questions while we're in the flow, I will get you some answers. Let me I'll listen to that track and see what's going on there. Yeah, so I've got it going right now. Basically, like what I was talking about, this has a very, very defined relationship between kick and low end. They are not fighting at all, and that's a huge part of getting it to sound so loud and so big. The low end elements are living within their own areas, and then like that Kodo sample has lots and lots of definition in the upper mids. Big control on sub elements. Yeah, and having the definition up top in the upper mids is making the low end feel bigger because there's more contrast between low sounds and high sounds, basically. And contrast inherently makes things bigger. Yeah, I mean that's basically what is yeah. So just more control on your end and more definition. Uh and so yeah, more aggressive separation on low end elements and then further definition up top so that we have big contrast between low sounds and high sounds. And then yeah, filling out that mid range, filling out that definition on like the brass samples, that's going to add to the like effect of low end. And then control in your mix, like the very, very subby frequencies. And then once you slam a limiter, they'll be more present and you'll be able to get like that big impact without crushing the mix. So within the mix stage, you got to control that low end and dial it back, and it'll sound bigger on the back end. Yeah, always happy to help. Super awesome question. Solid reference. I definitely see what you're going for. All right. Kaido, I'm going to call it for the night. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for sending the track. I'll be back tomorrow. And yeah, super awesome to be here. I am, yes, I am happy to be here. See you tomorrow. See folks tomorrow. Have a good one. Stay safe. Keep making awesome tracks.